Many people notice that certain mistakes remain vivid in their memory long after they happen. A moment from the past suddenly returns. The brain replays what was said, what happened, and how the situation unfolded. Sometimes the memory appears years after the event itself. The scene may feel surprisingly detailed. A person might remember the exact words spoken, the environment, or the reactions of others. These memories often appear unexpectedly during quiet moments. Psychologists have studied this pattern because it reveals how the brain processes errors and social experiences. Human memory does not treat all events equally. Certain experiences are stored with greater intensity, especially those connected to strong emotion or important social situations. Mistakes often fall into this category. When the brain detects that something went wrong, it may mark the event as important for future understanding. The repeated replay of old mistakes therefore reflects how the mind continues examining experiences that carry meaning long after they occur. One reason mistakes remain vivid in memory is the brain's ability to monitor errors. Humans possess a cognitive system that constantly compares expectations with actual outcomes. When an action produces a different result than expected, the brain registers this difference. This process is sometimes described as error detection. The mind notices that something did not unfold as planned. Because mistakes may contain valuable information, the brain often gives them additional attention. Rather than ignoring the event, memory systems may store it more carefully. This allows the mind to revisit the experience later and examine what happened. During these moments of replay, the brain studies the sequence of events leading to the outcome. It analyzes what was said, what decisions were made, and how the situation developed. Through this repeated examination, the mind attempts to understand how the mistake occurred and what it revealed about the situation. Mistake replay is especially common in social situations. Human interactions involve complex signals such as tone of voice, facial expressions, and subtle reactions from others. Because these signals appear quickly, the brain may not fully interpret them during the original moment. After the interaction ends, the mind often returns to the event. The brain begins examining the conversation again, searching for clues about how the interaction was perceived. A sentence that seemed ordinary earlier may appear different when remembered later. The mind may wonder how the words sounded from another person's perspective. Through this replay, the brain attempts to interpret the meaning of the interaction more clearly. Mistakes within social situations therefore become especially memorable. They provide information about how communication works and how actions influence relationships with others. Another reason old mistakes remain active in memory is the brain's ability to imagine alternative outcomes. When a past event returns to attention, the mind often constructs slightly different versions of what might have happened. A person may imagine saying something different during a conversation, or choosing another action in a decision. These imagined alternatives create a comparison between the original event and possible outcomes that never occurred. The brain examines how the situation might have unfolded if a different choice had been made. This process helps the mind understand how actions influence results. Mistake replay therefore often includes both memory and imagination. The original event appears alongside imagined variations. Through this comparison, the brain studies how different decisions could lead to different consequences. The replay of mistakes becomes a way for the mind to analyze possibilities within past experience. Memory replay also happens because the brain attempts to organize experiences into meaningful patterns. Human memory is not simply a storage system that records events exactly as they occurred. Instead, the brain constantly interprets experiences and tries to understand how different moments are connected. When a mistake occurs, the mind may treat that moment as a signal that something important needs to be examined. The event becomes a reference point. The brain begins linking that moment with other experiences, searching for similarities and differences. During this process, the mind may replay the situation repeatedly while it organizes the information. Each replay allows the brain to place the event into a broader pattern of understanding. The mistake becomes part of a larger story, about how events unfold and how actions influence outcomes. Through repetition, the mind gradually integrates the experience into its broader interpretation of the world. Emotion also plays a strong role in why certain mistakes remain active in memory. Events connected to embarrassment, disappointment, or surprise often become more vivid because emotional systems in the brain interact closely with memory systems. When a strong emotion occurs during an experience, the brain may mark the event as especially important. This marking increases the likelihood that the memory will return to attention later. The emotional tone of the moment acts like a signal that the event deserves further examination. When the mind revisits the situation, it may replay not only the facts of the event, but also the emotional atmosphere surrounding it. The brain studies both the action and the feeling connected to it. Through this process, the mind attempts to understand the relationship between decisions, reactions, and emotional consequences. Another reason mistakes replay in memory is the brain's tendency to simulate learning through reflection. Human thinking often involves examining events after they occur in order to understand them more clearly. When the mind replays a mistake, it is not simply remembering the event. It is reconstructing the situation step by step. The brain reviews the sequence of actions that led to the outcome and compares those actions with alternative possibilities. This reflective process allows the mind to analyze the structure of the event. By mentally reconstructing what happened, the brain creates a detailed model of the situation. Each replay may highlight a different part of the experience. One moment the mind focuses on what was said, another moment on the timing of the decision or the reaction of others. Through these repeated examinations, the brain gradually builds a clearer understanding of how the mistake unfolded. Quiet moments often provide the conditions in which mistake replay becomes most noticeable. When attention is occupied with tasks that require concentration, the mind tends to focus on immediate activity. However, during periods of rest or low demand, the brain often turns toward internal reflection. This reflective state allows memory systems to revisit events that remain unresolved or meaningful. Old mistakes may appear during these moments because the brain now has the opportunity to examine them more carefully. Without external distractions, the mind can replay details that were previously overlooked. The memory may unfold slowly, revealing small aspects of the situation that were not fully noticed at the time. In this way, quiet moments allow the brain to continue studying experiences that still hold psychological importance. Another reason old mistakes return to memory is the brain's tendency to search for meaning in past experiences. Human thinking rarely treats events as isolated moments. Instead, the mind attempts to understand why something happened and what it reveals about future situations. When a mistake appears in memory, the brain often begins asking questions about the event. It examines the circumstances that surrounded the moment and considers what factors influenced the outcome. The mind may analyze timing, communication, or decisions that were made during the situation. Through this questioning process, the brain attempts to build a clearer explanation of the event. Each replay of the memory may highlight a different detail. Over time, the mind gradually constructs a more complete interpretation of the experience. Mistake replay, therefore, reflects the brain's effort to transform a confusing moment into something that can be understood. Mistakes may also remain vivid because they interrupt expectations. During everyday activity, the brain often predicts how events are likely to unfold. These predictions help people move through situations quickly without needing to analyze every detail. When a mistake occurs, however, the outcome may differ from what the brain expected. This difference immediately captures attention. The mind notices that the event did not follow the predicted pattern. Because unexpected outcomes provide new information, the brain may store the moment more carefully. Later, when the memory returns, the mind examines the difference between what was expected and what actually happened. By studying this contrast, the brain attempts to refine its future predictions. The replay of mistakes therefore reflects how the mind updates its understanding of how events develop. Memory replay can also reveal how the brain reconstructs past events rather than simply retrieving them. Each time a mistake returns to attention, the mind rebuilds the memory using fragments of stored information. The brain combines sensory details, emotional impressions, and knowledge gained after the event occurred. Because of this reconstruction process, the memory may change slightly each time it appears. New interpretations may be added as the mind reflects on the situation from a different perspective. The brain may notice details that were overlooked during the original moment. It may also reinterpret certain actions based on later understanding. This dynamic quality of memory means that replaying mistakes is not only about remembering the past. It is also about re-examining the event in light of new knowledge. The brain's focus on mistakes can also reflect the importance of learning from experience. Throughout human life, many important skills develop through trial and error. Actions that produce unexpected results often provide valuable information about how situations operate. When a mistake occurs, the mind may treat the event as a lesson that deserves careful attention. The replay of the experience allows the brain to analyze the sequence of events and the consequences that followed. Each examination helps clarify what occurred during the situation. Over time, the mind builds a more detailed understanding of the conditions that influence the outcome. In this way, mistake replay becomes part of the brain's broader effort to learn from experience and refine its understanding of the world. Another factor that keeps old mistakes active in memory is the brain's tendency to revisit situations that remain unresolved. When an event ends clearly, the mind often moves on quickly because the outcome feels complete. However, some experiences do not provide that sense of closure. A conversation might end abruptly, a decision might feel unfinished, or the consequences of an action may remain unclear. In these situations, the brain may continue examining the event in order to understand it more fully. The memory returns because the mind is still searching for explanation. During replay, the brain studies details that might clarify the meaning of what happened. Each time the memory appears, the mind attempts to resolve the uncertainty surrounding the event. This process shows how strongly the brain prefers to understand experiences rather than leaving them unexplained. The social nature of human life also contributes to why mistakes remain vivid. Many important experiences involve other people, and these interactions often carry emotional meaning. When a mistake occurs within a social situation, the brain may examine how actions influence the reactions of others. The mind might recall a conversation, a gesture, or a decision that affected the interaction. Because social relationships play such a large role in human life, the brain pays close attention to moments that may influence those relationships. Replay allows the mind to examine how communication unfolded and how different responses might have shaped the outcome. Through this process, the brain attempts to interpret the meaning of the interaction more clearly. Mistakes connected to social experiences therefore often remain active in memory for long periods of time. Imagination also becomes involved when the brain revisits past mistakes. When a memory returns, the mind often begins constructing alternative versions of the event. These imagined versions might involve different choices, different words, or different reactions from others. By comparing these alternatives with the original event, the brain studies how small changes could have produced different outcomes. This comparison process allows the mind to explore possibilities that never actually occurred. The memory becomes a starting point for examining how events might unfold under slightly different conditions. In this way, replaying mistakes combines memory with imagination. The brain is not only recalling the past, but also exploring variations of the event. These imagined alternatives help the mind understand how actions influence results within complex situations. The passage of time can also influence how mistakes appear in memory. As new experiences accumulate, the brain gradually gathers additional information about similar situations. When an old mistake returns to attention, the mind may examine the event using knowledge gained after it occurred. A person may now understand aspects of the situation that were not clear at the time. Because of this new perspective, the replayed memory can feel different from the original experience. The brain is viewing the past through the lens of later understanding. This process allows the mind to reinterpret events that once seemed confusing. Old mistakes therefore become opportunities for the brain to connect past experiences with new knowledge. Another reason mistakes return repeatedly is that the brain often studies events that involve unexpected outcomes. When something happens that contradicts expectations, the mind becomes especially curious about the cause. The brain begins examining the sequence of events that produced the result. Replay allows the mind to analyze each moment carefully, searching for clues about how the situation developed. The brain may notice details that were overlooked during the original moment. A small decision, a subtle reaction, or a change in timing may appear more significant during reflection. Through repeated examination, the mind attempts to identify the factors that influence the outcome. This process reveals how the brain investigates events that differ from its original predictions. Mistake replay also demonstrates how closely memory and reflection are connected. Human thinking often involves revisiting past experiences in order to understand them more deeply. During reflection, the brain does not simply recall the event. Instead, it analyzes the structure of what happened. The mind reviews actions, reactions, and consequences in sequence. Each replay allows the brain to observe the event from a slightly different angle. Sometimes the focus shifts toward what was said, while other times the mind examines the reactions of others or the timing of a decision. Through these repeated reflections, the brain builds a more detailed understanding of the experience. Mistake replay, therefore, reflects the mind's effort to examine complex events with greater clarity. Another reason old mistakes remain vivid is the brain's sensitivity to moments that involve strong attention. When a person realizes that something has gone wrong, attention often becomes intensely focused on the event. The mind quickly gathers information about what just happened. Because attention was so concentrated during the moment, the details of the experience may be stored more clearly in memory. Later, when the memory returns, those details can feel surprisingly vivid. The brain remembers the environment, the conversation, or the sequence of actions with unusual clarity. This vividness can make the mistake seem more significant than other events that occurred at the same time. The strong attention present during the original moment therefore contributes to the persistence of the memory. Quiet periods of reflection often provide the opportunity for these memories to return. When the brain is actively engaged in demanding tasks, attention remains focused on immediate activity. However, during moments when the mind is less occupied, memory systems may begin revisiting meaningful experiences. Old mistakes can appear during these reflective moments because the brain now has the freedom to examine them without distraction. The memory may unfold gradually, revealing details that were not fully noticed earlier. In this environment, the mind can explore the experience more carefully. The replay, therefore, reflects how the brain continues analyzing important events whenever the opportunity for reflection appears. From a psychological perspective, the replay of mistakes reveals how actively the brain studies past experiences. Memory is not a passive record of events. Instead, it functions as a system that continually interacts with reflection and interpretation. When a mistake returns to attention, the mind is often examining the event rather than simply remembering it. The brain compares the past experience with knowledge gained afterward. It evaluates how actions influence the outcome and what patterns may exist within the situation. Through this ongoing examination, the mind attempts to build a deeper understanding of the experience. Mistake replay, therefore, reflects the brain's effort to analyze events that carry meaning within personal history. When viewed from a broader perspective, the brain replaying old mistakes becomes easier to understand. The mind constantly attempts to interpret experiences and build patterns from them. Events that carry strong emotional, social, or informational significance may receive additional attention. When a mistake occurs, the brain may treat that moment as a valuable source of information about how situations unfold. By revisiting the event, the mind studies the connection between actions and outcomes. Each replay becomes an opportunity to examine the experience more closely. What feels like the mind returning to the past is often the brain continuing its effort to understand the event. The replay of old mistakes, therefore, reveals how memory, reflection, and imagination work together as the mind studies its own experiences.